I was asked to do a video on koi food, so here it is. Keep watching to learn more about the hidden problems of the real cost of cheap food and the added benefits of good food. If you would like a subject covered, please post a comment below. Please note that I've stated good food rather than expensive food, as I believe that there are some very cost-effective foods out there. Just because it may appear expensive at first glance, but it may well appear cheaper in the long run. If you look at the thumbnail, you can see that good food outweighs cheap food in more ways than one. Cheap food often weighs less than good food, as it contains more air and less actual food per pellet than good food. So you may well get more volume with a cheaper food, but actually less food. But more about that later. It is possible to talk at length koi food alone, but it's meaningless unless we look at the role water temperature plays. We need to understand that water temperature drives the koi's metabolism, which in turn drives the koi's appetite, which in turn drives the koi to eat. The koi's metabolism and immune system are strongly linked to water temperature. Basically, the warmer the water, the higher the metabolism of the koi. Therefore, the more they eat and the more they grow. But more importantly, more waste is produced and more filtration is needed to produce the waste, both mechanically and biologically. Let's look at the key water temperatures. Please note koi will tolerate a hike up in water temperatures, but koi are very sensitive if there's a sudden drop in water temperature. So please keep this fact in mind. Good food, whatever you can afford, but cheap food can be more expensive in the long run. A little and often is the secret with food, and so an auto feeder is a must. I use a Fishmate P7000 on a frequent feed setting. A top athlete has a very strict diet, and the same is true of koi. Our top athlete would not go to a fast food chain and expect to gain muscle. They know that they would only gain weight and fat. Very soon after constant feeding on fast food, they would soon become a couch potato. Food is a vital part of the development in a koi. Ignore it at your peril. So many koi keepers do, believing in the belief that cheap food is as good as more expensive food. You're just paying for the brand name, aren't you? No, you're not. You're paying for better ingredients. Cheap food is cheap for a reason. You get what you pay for. So check the ingredients on cheap food and then check it off against a more expensive brand. One, the waste is far more in cheaper food, as they are cheaper for a reason. They have to save costs somehow to make a profit. They do this by selecting cheaper alternatives, poultry waste, and bulking out the food with fillers, which have no nutritional value. So you end up feeding more cheap food, but get less growth. But you do get more waste in the water. Depending on the koi food you're using, check the label to ensure that you're feeding the correct water temperature for that particular product. There are two different types of koi food, floating or sinking. You can make sinking food by taking your floating food and sucking the air out of it with a vacuum bait box or even a syringe. I had a rat swim in the pond one day and I saw it pinch some floating food, so I fixed Mr. Ratty by switching to sinking food. I never saw him again. I'm not going to go into every different type of koi food. The food market is flooded with various foods, colour, wheat germ, all season, fry food, with different size pellets, sinking or floating, and then there's probiotic and medical food. I'm not going to go into all the combinations that you could use. I do believe it's very important to get the correct size pellet for smaller koi, under 20 cm. I also put clay into the auto feeder so that it coats the food as it feeds the koi. I top up the auto feeder and then clay to the top and spread it over the top of the pellets. The pellets roll down, and as they descend in the auto feeder, it coats them with the clay. I also like to feed a couple of different foods rather than one single brand of food. Or it might be two different types of food from the same brand of food. How would you feel if you had the same thing day in, day out? It would be boring. So I feed a mixture of foods to keep the koi interested in the food. A word of warning. Your koi will not grow if all you are feeding is your surface skimmer. So put them on a timer to work with your auto feeder. But remember to change the settings when you change the auto feeder. In the shed, I haven't got a surface skimmer, but I do have an overflow, which I protect the food from by having an air stone which pushes the food away from the overflow. Also, with sinking food, you're throwing money down your drain if you throw in a bucket full of food and your koi can't eat it fast enough before it disappears down the bottom drain. I also feed by looking at the waste or the uneaten food and using it as a guide to either reduce the feeding or increase the feeding so that there's no waste left. Overfeeding does sort out good and bad body shapes in a koi. Good body shapes will stay good, but bad will go fat very quickly. Females turn food into eggs or growth, which goes into width rather than length. Or does it just sort out the boys from the girls? Think of a room full of people in a room with all the windows shut, no fresh air going in, and somebody cranks up the thermostat to make people eat more. Would you feel hungry? No. But if you go for a walk and get refreshed with some fresh air and a bit of exercise, you come in and you could eat a horse. Well, it's the same for koi. They need fresh water and a bit of exercise to stimulate their appetite.